Hey guys, thanks so much for attending and taking time out of your day this afternoon to learn a little bit more about Holganix, about soil microbes, and about some of the studies that are underway with our products and agriculture. Dr. Stark is our president of agriculture, but his background is actually with some of the larger companies such as Monsanto. David, do you want to tell them a little bit about who you are?
Sure. Trying to advance the screen. There we go. Now I don't want to start there. Now we're gonna go away from the picture. So that's me. I have a doctorate in molecular biology. That's back in the 1980s here from Washington University. I spent my entire career with Monsanto. I did a number of different things there, from leadership and technology, running a couple different business units, global corporate affairs. And on retirement, was asked by a friend to help mentor this company that had an existing business in turf and wanted to get into agriculture. And I said yes, and that's how I got to know Holganix. So I've been with the company now almost 2 years as a full-time employee, and a year before that as kind of a consultant mentor.
Awesome, and we're so lucky to have you.
I'm happy. Believe me, this is a big, nice change from a big corporation. It's a lot of fun.
Awesome. Hey guys, because there's so many of you on, we can't have you all being able to talk and ask questions at the same time. So we're going to have a couple polls, such as this one, which I'll launch in a second. But if you guys have any questions, I see some of you are typing them out into the question box, which is awesome. Go ahead, throw them into the question box, and we'll address them at the end of the webinar. So I'm going to go ahead and throw up this first poll. This poll is just going to allow us to get a general understanding of who's on the webinar right now, so we can kind of tweak the webinar to fit you guys. So our options are agriculture, horticulture, lawn and landscape, golf, or I'm a distributor or Holganix employee. Maybe you're a partner of Holganix's in some respect. I know that there's not a lot of options there. We could only pick 5, so try and pick the one that fits you best. Looks like we got 67% of the vote. 75. Can we get 80? Nice. All right. I'll go ahead and share the results with everyone. So check this out, David. We've got 36% of the people are distributors, partners, or employees of Holganix. 18% are in ag, 27% are in lawn and landscape. So there's a pretty good diversity here.
Okay, great. And then do you want the next page, question 2?
Yeah. So this next question is, are you currently using any Holganix products? And if so, which ones? All right. So I'm going to go ahead and share the results again. So again, a great mix of people. So 50% aren't using any Holganix products yet, which is cool. 50% are using the Bio 800 Plus line. 20% are using PB1. 30% are using granular. And 30% are using one of the prebiotic fertilizers. So it's Blue Sky, 21020, or 0023. So awesome. Thanks for answering those questions, guys. It'll really allow us to kind of tailor the webinar depending on how used you are to the product line. So David, I will go ahead and let you take it over from here if you want to switch to the next slide. And then I'll chime in again as we post the questions.
All right. So I assume my slide is back up for everybody?
Yes, sir.
You can see it? Okay, excellent. Thank you. So again, thanks for taking the time to join us this afternoon. And one of the things that really drives organics and the whole discussion around soil health is the pressure that we're all increasingly under to do more with less. And we have this in agriculture. We certainly have it in the lawn and landscape industry, where it seems like every state I visit where we do a bionutritional summit, someone's talking about a restriction and being able to use fertilizer with phosphorus and other restrictions that are coming up. Those things are great in order to protect the environment, but as producers of either food, feed, fiber, or turf that is pleasurable or that we play sports on, we need to have production tools that help us meet our needs as well. So one of the inputs, like I mentioned, that's really under pressure is fertilizer. So I live here in St. Louis. I'm about 2 miles away from the Missouri River and maybe 10, 12 miles away from the Mississippi. So basically the middle third of North America is draining right by my home. And it ends up in the Gulf of Mexico, and there's dead zones and algal blooms. We see them in the news in Florida and such. So fertilizer is increasingly under pressure. And part of the issue is, depending on the data and the study and the soil type and the fertilizer type, anywhere from 40 to 60% of the fertilizer we spend our money on and apply never goes to the intended plant. It's wasted. So what happens to it? During rain, it can run off and leach. Some of it, especially nitrogen, can be volatilized and is lost in the air. And others, when it hits the soil and gets wet, it can react with other things in the soil, and it precipitates out, which means it's in a chemical form the plant can no longer take up. So it's sitting there doing no good. So again, a lot of waste in fertilizer. So this is one area where soil health can help play a role. And there's a lot of other things soil health is going to help us do. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about why soil health is important, what the different microbes do, and how we build a healthy soil, and how we degrade a healthy soil. So first of all, biology, plants, soil microorganisms, and soil animals, worms, etc., all work together to build and maintain a functional soil. Now, Holganix is part of the Soil Health Institute. As an institute, we're still looking, so what is the best definition of a functional soil? And, there are different opinions on it and such, but basically, in my mind, it's a soil that has organic matter. So it's not something that is less than 1%, like maybe a sand field or some of the really poor soils that I encounter in agriculture. It can't be too much organic matter, but I haven't seen soils that have too much. And the reason is organic matter holds water. And we don't want it to hold too much water, but we do want it to hold water, cation exchange capacity, so it holds nutrients. It's a loose in structure, so roots can easily penetrate, and air can penetrate. So again, life in the soil works together to build this functional soil. And again, in a functional soil, these organisms all contribute to mineralization or freeing nutrients. So in agriculture, the conversation mostly today around soil health is about two main tools. It's no-till and cover crops. Of course, there's a lot more to it than that. But I've had farmers tell me, I left my corn debris out in the field. A year later, it's still there. What's going on? Well, without microorganisms, that debris, whether it's in your cover crop or in corn stalks or in grass clippings, is going to stay there forever, because microbes have to break that debris down to re-release all those nutrients and make them available to the plant. So these are good tools, but they really require a functional soil and will help build a functional soil to really be most effective. You see, in a healthy situation, a plant is going to exert 30% of its energy which is a huge percentage, 30%, and divert that energy into food that it secretes in the root zone. And that food is to support and attract microorganisms. The plant wants the beneficial microorganisms in the root zone because those beneficial microbes, in return, not only protect the plant, but it also feeds the plant and helps the plant find water. So it's a great symbiotic type relationship. When we don't have a healthy soil, for example, when we put too much fertilizer underground, there's a biochemical signal that will tell the plants, don't spend so much energy feeding the microorganisms. There's plenty of nutrition today, so keep it to yourself. What happens is the microorganisms aren't fed. Before they die off, though, they start to consume the organic matter and the nutrients that are in the soil, and when that's gone, we're left with something that looks like this, and I'm very familiar with it. It is soil that's rock hard. You can't get a shovel in it. When it rains, water washes off like asphalt. It's basically just a solid support for plant roots, but isn't doing a whole lot to feed that plant. It's not holding water either. So this would be a soil that has been depleted, that really has no organic matter and is not a healthy soil. So I keep talking about microorganisms. And so I'm just going to spend a little bit of time talking about the major classes. And I'm not going to talk about all of them here on this slide, but here's the major classes of microbes, from bacteria, which are physically the smallest and numerically by far the most abundant. There can be billions, with a B, of microbes in 1 teaspoon of healthy soil, all the way down to the largest and least numerous, which are nematodes, which are basically microscopic worms. Some of those are good and some are bad. So let's talk about why each one is important. And this is where I like to stop and make the point that there's a lot of microbial products out there, a lot to choose from. And I've always been very transparent that my attitude up until a few years ago was there was a lot of snake oil because the science is still developing. A lot of the microbial products you're going to look at will have one component, so one species or 2 species of bacteria, one type of fungi. I'm not saying those are bad, because in a lot of times when you have a specific problem, those products are good. They can be effective. But in the grand scheme of having a healthy soil that cycles nutrients, that builds organic matter, that helps stimulate roots and protect the plant from disease, you need all of the microbes because they work together. So go for diversity. All of these microbes are important into a healthy soil because they each play a different role. So let's start with bacteria. So bacteria, in my mind, are really the workhorses. They're the ones that are at the final stage of breaking down nutrients and releasing them in the chemical form right in the root zone that the plants like. Now, there are other microbes that are really effective at that too, but bacteria are really doing a lot of the work in terms of freeing nutrients and capturing nutrients and keeping them in the root zone. So, for example, when we apply fertilizer and we have microbes in the soil, those microbes are going to capture that fertilizer, they're going to consume it. And because they're living in the root zone, that fertilizer stays in the root zone. So we're going to have less that goes into the air, less that runs off in the water, less that's not chemically available. Now, here's a quote. It's from the Food and Ag Organization. I'm going to let you guys read it. I usually read it for people. FAO is kind of the global United Nations of Agriculture, if you're not familiar with it. It's from an article, ironically, How Soil is Destroyed. But the last piece, bacteria may well be the most valuable of the life forms in soil because bacteria are so important and they can make all of the nutrients work together to the plant. There's also bacteria that produce hormones that say, look, we like roots, make more roots. So lots of things that bacteria are doing to help work with the plant. Now, if we go to the next kind of microbe, the fungi, so they're larger, they're numerically not as numerous as bacteria, but also critically important. And there are a number of different fungal types. So fungi, like bacteria, live in the root zone. They also can break down organic matter and help feed the plant. Some fungi, like trichoderma, live along the outside of the roots, and they're predators. So they're eating other microbes that want to eat the plant roots. So they're good things to have there in the soil. This particular picture is showing one of the most important fungi, which are the mycorrhizal fungi. So you can see the big, bold plant roots. The root hairs are a little finer and white, but all that white, feathery material throughout the slide here, the picture, that's actually fungus. So the mycorrhizal fungi are much smaller than the tiniest root hair. They live on or in the plant root. So they're part, in a sense, of the root system. But because they're smaller and they grow so much longer, they expand the effective root area of a plant anywhere 100 to 1,000 times. So mycorrhizae are getting between soil particles the plant can't get itself. They help the plant find water, and they help the plant find nutrients. In particular, phosphorus. They're really good at taking a lot of the phosphorus in the soil the plant can't access and feeding it right to the plant. So now let's go to some of the larger microbes. So this is a protozoa here in the middle. And you can see it's pretty large. All those little black specks all around it, those are bacteria. So protozoa absolutely love bacteria and can consume an incredible number of bacteria. This is important because remember a couple slides ago I said bacteria are eating our fertilizer. And it's good because it stays in the root zone. But none of us, me included, when I apply fertilizer, I'm thinking, oh, good, I'm feeding bacteria. I want to feed the plant. So how does that fertilizer eventually end up in the plant? It's through organisms like the protozoa. Bacteria have a very high requirement for nitrogen. So their carbon to nitrogen ratio is very high. But for protozoa, and I think this is just amazing in God's design for this, protozoa have a low requirement for nitrogen. It's actually toxic. So as these protozoa are eating the bacteria, and more protozoa will be there as the bacteria are growing on the fertilizer and the root exudates, the protozoa are releasing ammonia and nitrate right in the root zone, the two most favorite forms of plant root to take up for nitrogen. So all of the organisms are required to get that fertilizer to stay in the root zone and to be fed to the plant, which again is why I say go for diversity. In the inset here, that's a nematode that's actually eating another nematode. So nematodes, again, these microscopic worms, some of them eat the plant roots. They live on or inside the plant and they sap energy from it. Other nematodes are predators. They don't hurt the plant at all. They're like some fungi. They're eating other microbes, bacteria, fungi, protozoa, and doing the same thing. When you eat, you secrete waste, and for the plant root, that waste is nutrient. So nematodes are also involved in the recycling. So this is how microbes and plants work together. We have, let me just look around. How do we know this is true? Well, here's a forest. This is in the Pacific Northwest. You can see the tremendous amount of biomass. Now, Disney could probably insert in here little fairies that are feeding this forest and taking care of it, but we know that's not true. So instead, it's the microbes working with the plants, working with the animal life that's recycling all these nutrients. Here's another example. So you in the turf industry probably know this one right away. This is fairy ring. This is actually from a golf course not far from here in St. Louis. So fairy ring is a fungus. It's not the kind of fungus you want, of course, to use because it's a pathogen, But what happens is the fungus starts in the middle of the circle, and as it spreads outward at the leading edge of the infection, it's breaking down organic matter and releasing, in this case, mostly nitrogen to the grass, which is why it looks so green. So again, all we have to do is look around to see microbes really can and do feed plants. So now let's talk about Holganix and why we think it's an important part of building a healthy soil and using less inputs. So we're talking mostly about the Bio 800 Plus product, the liquid product. Now, the Healthy Grow products, especially, again, with the chicken manure, we can dry Bio 800 on those, and that's a really strong combination too. So I would include the Healthy Grow line in this as well, because again, the Healthy Grow is not only bringing nutrients, it's bringing organic matter to the soil too, as an option. But the liquid Bio 800 Plus has over 800 species of beneficial bacteria, fungi, protozoa, and nematodes. The product happens to be organic. It's all plant-based, and it's based on plant material so that we get the microbes that are healthy to your soil type. So what I use here in Missouri is not what Katie would use, for example, in Pennsylvania, and not what we would use in Florida. So we're taking plant material from 11 different climate zones and selling it back to that zone. Holganix has a number of customers that, again, we see their grass on TV on the weekends. I like customer pictures, and these are customer pictures. And when I first joined Holganix and started working as a mentor and consultant, it was these pictures that really got me to think, I need to really learn about soil science, because it's something at Monsanto we didn't really talk about a whole lot back then. So Muirfield Village Golf Club, the two pictures on the left, that's not far from where I grew up in Columbus, Ohio. It's Jack Nicklaus's course, a very high-end course, hosts the Memorial Tournament. In this particular case, this upper picture is the middle of August. This was 6 weeks before the course was hosting the President's Cup, which if you're a golfer, you know that is a major international televised golf tournament. That's a huge event. They wanted to move a tee box and part of a fairway. And in the middle of August, it's not when you plant grass seed or sod. And you can see this, the superintendent there had been working with Holganix. He decided that he needed to really use it and put it to the test here. And 1 month later, you can see how beautiful the results are. So quick establishment. Farmers like that too, by the way. The pictures on the right-hand side, on the top right corner, that's the third baseline of the Pittsburgh Pirates stadium. And they had a third baseman that had some chemical sensitivity to fungicides, so they couldn't spray. And they were getting dollar spot and getting a little desperate. 3 days later, after using Holganix, you can see the picture below. Now, dollar spot, of course, is a pathogen. There's also some nutrient deficiency that contributes. So again, the microbes in Holganix, because microbes fight each other, that's where we get antibiotics, for example. You get the good microbes to displace the bad ones and also start feeding the turf, and you can take care of a disease like dollar spot. And then finally, the two plants below, another customer picture. Those plants are the same age, and you can just see pretty clearly the difference in root mass and flowering between the two. So all of these things, less disease, quick establishment, faster growth of roots, are all things farmers want. So again, if the microbes can do this, we should be able to test it. So for the fertilizer rates, we have a number of studies, several dozen, at places that are some of the top turf programs in the country: NC State, Penn State, Purdue. And this is a graph that summarizes a lot of those studies, where depending upon the form of nitrogen, slow release, fast release, soil type, they show anywhere from a 50 to 88% reduction in fertilizer to maintain turf color and performance. I mean, this is huge. Now, to me, again, in agriculture, knowing the pressure farmers are under for fertilizer, this is really interesting. Now, I'm not saying in agriculture we're ever going to get this kind of fertilizer reduction, because there's a huge difference. Because you see, we leave our turf clippings out there so the nutrients can recycle. But every time we harvest a crop, we remove nutrients with that harvest. So we have to put them back. But could this be a tool where we can put back less, because more goes to the plant and less is wasted? So again, let's test that. So here's a picture. These are hot peppers. These are all grown on drip irrigation. This is actually in Florida. And this particular producer cut his fertilizer in half. To me, this is an extreme case. But at the same time, these plants are being fertilized every week. So he went to every other week and used Holganix. And you can see the difference in vigor of the plants. And he called me up and he said, Dave, you know, my only problem is I didn't use Holganix on my whole farm, because it's the best crop by far I've ever had. We did something similar in potato. So two different studies here. The top, where it's not highlighted in light blue, those are a couple commercial growers in Idaho. They did not change their fertilizer regime. They used their standard fertilizer, and they got anywhere from a 10 to 16% increase in yield, which based on a pretty average price for potatoes is $300 to $440 an acre. Now at Washington State University, in that light blue line, we cut the fertilizer 20%. And these were replicated small plots. And the professor there calculated that because of the higher marketable yield and the fertilizer savings, it was about a $200 an acre advantage. So, I mean, frankly, if you're a grower, you probably go with the top, with the regular fertilizer and higher yield. And from a sustainability standpoint, that's okay, because it's how much input per unit produced. So I know the food value chain downstream, again, this all scores well. Now this is corn. This is northern Illinois. Again, some of the best, most fertile corn ground God created. This particular researcher also is in the business of doing soil testing. So he knew that there were soybeans on this field the year before, and soybeans, because they're a legume, put nitrogen back in the soil. They have bacteria that live in their roots that are nitrogen fixers. So he actually has a lot of nitrogen in the bank. So he used very little fertilizer compared to what most farmers in the area were doing. And this is key, because remember, if we put too much on, the plant has less root exudate, and it's not encouraging the microbial growth. So he backed off on the fertilizer, and with no fertilizer, just to show how good the ground is, 224 bushels an acre of corn. National average that year, I think, was 169, something like that. So phenomenal. Using only 45 pounds an acre, he got that up to 236. If you cut that 45 pounds by 20%, the bar on the right in green, you got the same yield. If you use the same fertilizer, you got 11 bushels more. So again, the microbes in Holganix are helping more of that fertilizer go to the plant and get better performance. So what about just overall yield? So this is a strawberry trial. This is Ventura County, California. A nice place to visit if you have a chance, right on the ocean there. And using Holganix through the drip irrigation, and this is a long season where they're picking every week, $3,000 an acre net return to the grower. And he was using Holganix once a month through the drip tape. I mean, and what he saw was not only earlier harvest, which is important because that's when the prices are best, because not everybody has berries, but he had greater marketable yield and total yield. Here's more customer pictures on the left. These are cucumbers. This, I believe, is northern Kentucky. You can see with Holganix on the right-hand side there, greater vigor. He was able to harvest a week early when prices were better. We have 4 years of trials now of tomatoes in Indiana, where there's a processing industry. And again, we average anywhere 2 to 4 tons an acre higher yield over the 4 years. That's about 10%. Now, one of the things that really surprised us pleasantly was what we found with nematodes. So the table shows different sections of a golf course in Florida where nematodes can be a big problem. And after 1 year of using Holganix, you can see the huge drop in sting, root knot, and lance nematodes. So as an ag guy, I know nematodes are probably the biggest problem most farmers don't know they have. They're expensive to treat. It's not always easy to diagnose when you have nematodes because the damage can look like other things too, but they are a yield robber. And so we took the program or the product to the University of Illinois to a nematode expert. He's done a couple years of field trials and extensive lab and greenhouse studies, and he's showing that the Holganix Bio 800 Plus liquid has at least 3 different modes of action that are controlling nematodes. Prevents eggs from hatching. The juveniles get confused and have trouble finding the right spot to feed on the root. And there are some bacteria and fungi, like in this picture, that directly kill the nematode. So we're really excited about the nematode control. We're still early on learning about how to use it, how to dose it, how it may change in different soil types. But this is very, very promising. And Brix. Brix is basically a measurement of flavor in fruits and vegetables, sweetness. And these are, again, customer data, not our data, from a number of crops, mostly in the northeast part of the United States. And you can see great increases in Brix. And one of the things that I don't have data on, but I know from the literature, is higher sugar tends to repel piercing and sucking insects, which is kind of weird because you'd think they might like sugar, but they're actually repelled by it. And I have customer anecdotes that say, well, yeah, you're right. I didn't have as many white flies or aphids. So this is an interesting observation, something that I need to really dig into going forward. So look, all of this is great, but I had my first year of using Holganix applicator error, and that would be me. And because I thought I've got so much grass clippings, I'm not going to use any fertilizer. And I did okay. I mean, the lawn looked okay. My wife was very unimpressed. So the next year I actually took Barrett's recommendations. I cut my fertilizer in half though. So this is a picture in June. My neighbor and I both cut the lawn within a couple hours of each other. He has a commercial lawn care service. By June, and I started mowing here, by the way, in February. It was a really early spring. I had used only 5/8 a pound of nitrogen per 1,000. And you can see just the difference in color and vigor. It was outstanding. So, you know, when your wife finally gets it, do you need any more proof? So, again, in summary, if you're going to use microbes, go for diversity, especially in an agricultural field where the difference in what's under your foot in one spot can be a totally different problem 5 feet away. And you know that when you look at your yield monitor, as you go across the field, you can have 2x, 2 times the difference in yield in the same field. So putting down a narrowly focused microbe, unless you know you have a specific need, isn't going to address all of the different issues in a field which naturally is highly variable. So microbes can do an awful lot for us. They work with fertilizer, work with your plants, and I'd encourage you to give us a try. So Katie, with that, if there's questions, I think I'll go to that one. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. And just before we start the questions, excuse me, so look for a follow-up email later on this evening. You'll get the PowerPoint slides, a webinar recording. You'll also get the Holganix Bio 800 ingredient list, a couple case studies, and our product catalog. If you have any questions, of course, you can reach out directly.